In 1942, when Nazi Germany had occupied most of Europe, the United States and its allies launched one of the most secretive and ambitious projects in history, the Manhattan Project, a race to develop the first atomic bomb before the Nazis could. This weapon was built in Los Alamos, above the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico. It was there that scientists were working on a plutonium bomb with an implosion mechanism. After years of tireless research and massive collective effort, they finally proved that this weapon actually worked. On July 16, 1945, at Trinity, in the middle of the Jornada del Muerto desert, the device, codenamed the Gadget, was detonated. Its yield was about 21 kilotons. Night turned into day, and an artificial sun rose in the middle of the desert. When news of the test reached Harry Truman, he was at the Potsdam Conference. A message was sent to him from New Mexico saying that the test had been more successful than expected. This very news completely changed the atmosphere of negotiations with Churchill and Stalin. The situation changed. He was sure the bomb would work. On July 26th, the Potsdam Declaration was issued. The United States, Britain, and China. They demanded that Japan surrender and warned that if Japan did not surrender, it would face swift and complete destruction. But Tokyo was divided. The Japanese government did not give a clear answer. Their last hope was still that maybe the Soviet Union would mediate for peace. But even before this half-hearted response, the gears of the war machine had already started turning. On July 25th, Truman approved General Karl Spatz's order. He authorized the use of the atomic bomb as soon as weather conditions allowed. The list of targets was determined: Hiroshima, Kokura, Niigata, and Nagasaki. Actually, there was another city that was originally on the list, Kyoto. But Henry Stimson, the US Secretary of War, removed it, because Kyoto was the cultural and academic heart of Japan. Preserving it was very important for reconciliation and reconstruction after the war. Tokyo was never chosen because months of heavy bombing had already almost destroyed the city, so it was no longer possible to assess the extent of destruction caused by the atomic bomb there. The conditions just didn't allow for it. In contrast, Hiroshima had remained almost untouched up to that point. That made it the best option to accurately study the real and devastating effects of the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, the mission that had been planned for months began from Northfield Air Base on Tinian Island. At 2:45 in the morning, a Boeing B-29 aircraft named Enola Gay, piloted by Paul Tibbets, took off from the runway. At that moment, the world witnessed the flight of the first combat-ready atomic bomb. It was called Little Boy. 2 other planes accompanied it, the Great Artiste, equipped with devices to measure the blast's power, and the necessary evil aircraft was responsible for photographing and documenting the mission. The Little Boy bomb was a uranium weapon weighing approximately 4,400 kilograms. Its design worked by rapidly firing a uranium projectile into another uranium target to create a critical mass. This sudden collision was supposed to trigger the start of an uncontrolled chain reaction. And this reaction released explosive power equivalent to about 15,000 tons, or 15 kilotons, of TNT. After a 6-hour flight covering about 2,400 kilometers, the planes reached Japanese territory. It was around 7 in the morning. A reconnaissance plane called Straight Flush had already reported that the sky over Hiroshima was completely clear. That very report sealed the fate of the city as the planes flew at an altitude of about 31,000 feet. That means they were nearly 9.5 kilometers up when Tibbets began the bombing run and handed over final control to the bomb release officer. That is Thomas Farabee. The Japanese radar detected that small group of planes at around 7:09 in the morning. The air raid siren sounded in Hiroshima. But when they saw there were only 3 planes, the Japanese military assumed it was just a reconnaissance mission, not a bombing run. Tragically, they turned off the siren and people returned to their daily routines. At 8:09 in the morning, the Aoi Bridge near the city center appeared in the bomb site in front of Farabi's eyes. Exactly at 8:15 a.m., when Enola Gay reached the release point, Farabi pressed the button. The bomb bay doors of the bomber opened and Little Boy was released, heading straight for Hiroshima for 43 seconds. Then, the bomb reached its predetermined altitude of 600 meters right above the Shima Surgical Clinic. Of course, the main target, the Aoi Bridge, was about 240 meters away from there. At this altitude, the radar altimeters activated the internal mechanism. The uranium projectile was fired towards the uranium target, and the nuclear chain reaction began. The explosion occurred in a fraction of a millionth of a second. The energy released was equivalent to 15,000 tons of TNT. Suddenly, a blinding white light, brighter than the sun, engulfed the city. It could be seen from kilometers away. Witnesses said that first there was a blinding light, then a terrifying, deafening sound shook the entire city. At that moment, an atomic fireball formed, rapidly grew until it reached a diameter of about 200 meters, and everything it touched was vaporized. The shockwave from the explosion spread outwards, causing unimaginable destruction throughout the city, about 340 meters. Almost all concrete buildings were leveled to the ground, and the fatality rate was nearly 100% within a radius of about 1.7 kilometers. All residential houses collapsed, massive fires broke out, and there were horrific casualties. Even at a farther distance, up to about 4.5 kilometers, the blast wave shattered windows. Thousands of people, driven by curiosity, after seeing the flash, moved toward the windows and were injured. The intense thermal radiation caused third-degree burns. The burns were so deep that they penetrated the underlying layers of skin, leaving many people permanently disabled. Within a 2-kilometer radius, the heat was so intense that fatal burns occurred in a fraction of a second. The city was engulfed in flames, and a firestorm broke out that raged for hours without stopping. Out of Hiroshima's population of about 350,000, nearly 70,000 to 80,000 people died instantly. The explosion killed people instantly through the blast, heat, and immediate radiation. Many of them left no trace of their bodies behind. Only the scorched shadows of their bodies were imprinted on the ground and walls. Shadows that still remain like a grim reminder. They have endured to this day. Thousands more died in the days, months, and even years that followed due to illness. They died from radiation exposure, burns, and the cancers caused by it. By the end of 1945 alone, the number of casualties had reached over 140,000. That very day, Truman sent a message to the world. In a serious and firm tone, he said that if Japan did not accept our terms immediately, it should expect a destruction the likes of which the world had never seen before. Despite all that unprecedented destruction, the Japanese government, plagued by hesitation, internal conflict, and even disbelief, still continued to fight. So it was decided that another atomic bomb should be dropped. On August 9, 1945, just 3 days after the destruction of Hiroshima, the second precise and calculated mission began. Again, from the same Northfield Air Base on Tinian Island. This time, 6 B-29 aircraft, each with a specific task. The main plane, Boxcar, piloted by Charles Sweeney, was carrying the Fat Man bomb, a plutonium bomb of the implosion type. Much more advanced and powerful than Little Boy, which was dropped on Hiroshima. Another plane, the Great Artiste, was again responsible for recording and measuring the power of the explosion. Meanwhile, Big Stink was in charge of photographing and documenting the mission. 2 other planes were also sent ahead to scout the weather conditions. Enola Gay was checking the weather over Kokura, while Lagan Dragon headed toward Nagasaki. A backup plane called Full House had to turn back early due to a technical problem and never reached the target. 2 days after the flight, Boxcar faced a serious problem. The fuel transfer pump failed, leaving about 640 gallons of fuel unusable. On the other hand, Big Stink didn't arrive at the designated rendezvous point over Yakushima Island on time. It was flying at the wrong altitude, and instead of making short and precise turns, it was taking long and incorrect routes. This caused confusion and delays. Despite all these problems, the group proceeded toward Kokura, the primary target. But when they arrived, visibility was limited. Partly because of clouds, but mostly because the workers at the Yahata steel factory had started burning tar and coal to create thick black smoke to cover the city and prevent it from being bombed. Boxcar tried 3 times to carry out the bombing, but each time it failed because the bombardier couldn't visually identify the target accurately. Meanwhile, during these delays at the base, the Japanese anti-aircraft gunners started firing more accurately and trapped the planes in a ring of fire. After the 3rd unsuccessful attempt, the Boxcar crew had to give up on Kokura and head toward their next target, Nagasaki. This event later led to an expression entering Japanese culture called Kokura's luck, meaning escaping a major disaster without even realizing how close you came to danger. But there was another problem as well. Boxcar was running dangerously low on fuel. The crew had previously agreed that landing with the atomic bomb on board was extremely dangerous, so if visual targeting in Nagasaki didn't work, they would use radar, and if there was no other option, they would drop the bomb into the sea. They would release it. A few minutes before 11 a.m., the planes reached the skies over Nagasaki. Visibility was limited here as well, but right at the critical moment, the clouds parted for a few seconds and the bombardier was able to see the target. Exactly at 11 a.m., the plane, the Great Artiste, released the instruments to measure the power of the explosion. 1 minute later, at 11:01 a.m., Fat Man was released. It was exactly 11:02 a.m. when Fat Man exploded over Nagasaki, marking Japan's 2nd atomic disaster. The explosion occurred at an altitude of about 500 meters. With a force close to 21 kilotons, a nuclear fireball with a radius of over 200 meters formed. The heat at that moment was as intense as the surface of the sun. Everything within that area was destroyed in a fraction of a second. Buildings, cars, and people all vanished in the blink of an eye. The shockwave of the explosion spread outward, within a radius of about 760 meters. Even reinforced concrete buildings were leveled to the ground. In a larger area, up to about 1.7 kilometers, houses and shops collapsed and caught fire. Widespread fires broke out, and thousands of people were either severely injured or trapped under the rubble. By the end of 1945, somewhere between 60,000 to 80,000 people in Nagasaki, due to the explosion, fires, and the immediate effects of radiation, lost their lives. But that wasn't the whole story. A few hours earlier, just before midnight on August 8th, the Soviet Union had launched its massive attack on Japanese-occupied Manchuria. This meant the last hope for mediation was also gone with the wind. Now, Japan was facing 2 disasters at the same time: unprecedented atomic bombings and a massive Soviet attack. Emperor Hirohito realized that continuing the war was pointless. In a message to the people, he announced that the enemy possessed a new and extremely cruel weapon, and finally, on August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered. On September 2, 1945, Japan's official instrument of surrender was signed on the deck of a warship, the USS Missouri, in Tokyo Bay. At that very moment, World War II officially ended. Now, 80 years have passed since that day. 8 decades since humanity unleashed atomic destruction upon itself for the first time. Since that fateful event, which many have called the last bomb dropped on humanity, the world still lives under the shadow of the threat of nuclear annihilation. Yet there is still hope that Hiroshima and Nagasaki will forever remain the first, last, and only times these weapons are used in war.